and I invite all the panelists to come up on stage. So what we're going to have now is a panel discussion from various presenters who were here yesterday and today. And we're going to have several different topics, different questions to ask them. And if time allows, we'll take some questions from the audience. I am also going to participate in the latter half. In the first half, I'll act as a moderator, and then I'll change hats and become one of the presenters, and Alexander will take over responsibility from that point. So we have about 45 minutes. I'm going to start with a very specific question to Federico, but all the panelists can also give an answer, and then I'll have some more general questions after that. So the first question, Federico, I'm going to ask is, I loved your talk yesterday on consciousness. So my question is, neuroscience tells us that there are very specific parts of the brain that can perform very specific functions. For example, there's an area that can recognize faces. Another area can recognize words. And so I'm wondering, in your framework, how does it go from that neural activity into consciousness?
The cells do not use information the way we understand information in science. The informational computers, they are bits. The bits are simply agreements that we have with physical structure that work as statistical systems, classical systems. And so a bit is simply, a agreement that if the voltage in a node of a circuit is between this level and that level is a 0, and if it is between another level and a fourth level is a 1. So that is not the type of information that we have in living cells. In living cells, we have atoms, molecules, we have elementary particles, protons, that are actually, that you have to take as information, as matter. In other words, they are molecules with which the living system construct other molecules after structures, or they are molecules that are broken apart to give you energy. So there is information, energy, and matter. And they are all rolled into one. You cannot break them apart. Sometimes the particle, as it carries information, some other times it carries itself as matter or itself as energy. I call that live information. That live information, there are atoms and molecules in space-time, which are actually the symbols that conscious entities which are not in space-time, they're in a vaster reality, use to communicate with a living organism. So in other words, my consciousness does not exist in space-time like my body does. And my consciousness communicates with my body with live symbols, not with the abstract symbols like the bits. The quantum information is actually a representation of the meaning that is within my consciousness. So it's the way through mathematics we are representing what we experience. But so I distinguish between consciousness space, which is a space that can be represented by Hilbert space, mathematics in Hilbert space, versus the informational space, which is made of live information, not abstract information, live information, which exists in space-time. I call that I space, information space, or information space. The two are working together. They're inseparable from each other. So it's not like you have a separation between live information and meaning, which is what you get when you have an experience. So that's how there is a communication between my conscious self, which is more than the body, and the body, which is, however, an integral part of who I am. But it is really a symbolic entity, because the ultimate essence is in the interaction between I space and C space.
Well, very interesting. I don't know if any of the other panel members want to address that question, the relationship between consciousness and the brain.
Thank you, Federico. It's so good to see you again. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be with everyone, and Anneloes and Anne. Oh, Anne, bless you. Oh, gosh. Federico, I agree with you. I think what we're coming towards, all of us, is a perspective that in some way cosmic mind articulates itself as meaningful information, and how we call it live information, or as David Bohm called it, active information. It's something that is fundamental to the nature of reality. And in my framework, it is cosmic consciousness expressing itself, not just as a universal alphabet of ones and zeros, because that is not sufficient, but in whatever way that alphabet becomes meaning. And how then does cosmic mind co-create a universe of meaning that exists essentially to evolve? And that universe of meaning is multidimensional. So Anne, it naturally encompasses archetypal consciousness, Jungian awareness, multidimensionality. And Anneloes, it naturally, as we've worked together, this sense of infodynamics, I'd love you to speak more about it, is a way in which this cosmic awareness, this cosmic consciousness articulates itself in a meaning evolving universe of which we're all part of the whole. And this is where I feel we're all coming together. And however the slightly different parallax of our perspectives is, we're all in the same direction. And I'm just overjoyed to be part of this journey for us all together, and everyone on this call and everyone on this. And, you know, if we follow where the evidence is leading us, we'll continue to, you know, co-create a reality that supports us and empowers us and inspires us to what I personally feel is an amazing potential for conscious evolution. But I'd like to pass the talking stick over to both Anne and Anneloes in this response to Richard's question and Federico's starting us and me continuing us.
I think that looking at my own life and looking at the friends that I've gathered around me, or that we've been gathered together in this group here, there's no question that we aren't guided. And it's like those fairy tales where the seeds are laid out, you know, through the forest, and the younger son, or whoever it is, has to follow the trail of the seeds, and then it leads into the place where he's meant to be, and there he meets an old woman or an old man who tells him the wisdom of life. Then he goes, he finds the treasure, and it is a fairy tale, absolutely. And I think that I sent Federico a talk that I gave on alchemy about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I got some facts wrong about the actual things that he'd done, but we had a little brief correspondence, and that in itself is to me a miracle, you know, that this should happen, and that I'm here with all of you. So, and I've looked at my own life now, I'm very old, and looking back at how I was guided from the age of 15 to look for the quest for the grail, really, follow the seeds, follow the signs, which weren't very clear when you're young. They're not very clear usually, although they were in your case, Jude, because you had these experiences. But for most of us, it's been a long labor, really, to come to this point where I feel we're being gathered definitely by the universe or the cosmos to work together to create this new civilization, this new form of education that Anneloes was speaking about, this new kind of regenerative agriculture. All these different fields need attention with the input that we are being guided, and we're being taught how to come back into harmony with the cosmos, because we've been out of harmony for 4,000 years. And we need to find ways, all of us in our different lives, contribute to finding the ways which create this harmonic resonance again. But there's no doubt, I think it's wonderful that we're all gathered together and we're working together and we're bringing together our gifts and our experiences, and to be able to take them further in harmony with each other. That's absolutely wonderful, I think. So I'm very grateful to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Anne. Anneloes, would you like to?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Wow, I love this conversation. So to follow on from the hint of what Jude was giving also about the informational dynamics, they're indeed very, very important. And I just want to reference there some of the research that's come out of ecological psychology about young infancy. And what they're seeing, that what children are needing in order to not just learn, but learn in such a way that it becomes developmental, is the capacity to be able to explore the informational dynamics within their environment and in themselves. And that's not the same as just informational contents, as cognitive information, as things that they were taught. And so what you see something remarkable here is that life actually helps always to develop the sensory organs that can then make use of the informational potentials and dynamics within the field in such a way that that becomes a meaning creation process. Again, that's very important with education, because if you think education is only giving kids information, but we're not working with the fundamental informational dynamics of the universe, of how a universe learns and develops, then we are not actually stimulating the whole self-development of the child, of the human. And we get these very strange human beings, that we've been cultivating now, that have a partial view of life. So if we really get back to those basics, that the universe itself, it's very, very intelligent. It develops also its own sensory organs in order to be able to explore also all the informational potentials and dynamics, so that it becomes localized and embodied, as Jude also explained yesterday, embodied complexity. And that process is a process of self-actualization through which consciousness actualizes its cosmological potentials that are here. Yeah, so this is really meaningful information. I agree. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Anneloes. So the second question is a more general question for the panel. And that is, the cosmologies that we've heard from today and yesterday take science into account. We use scientific theories, sometimes quantum theory, other theories of science. My question is, you as panelists, how important do you feel it is that the scientific community subscribe to the new paradigm cosmologies that are emerging?
I love that Federico comes to this wonderful back. We come from sort of slightly convergent perspectives. I have to say I'm of the Buckminster Fuller view that says, rather than try and fight something that is resistant, we sing a better song. And it seems to me that the old paradigm of materialist separatism is being so life-limiting and so now to the point of unsustainability and existential crisis. So for me, what I'm so thrilled and excited about is there are new discoveries and ever compelling evidence to show that old perspective, that old paradigm of materialist separatism is fundamentally incorrect. And it's not that we're throwing out all the science of 300-400 years. We're building on the science of Newton. We're building on the science of James Clerk Maxwell and Faraday and Planck and Einstein and others. And we're expanding it to welcome in consciousness as being fundamental. And yet the old paradigm of materialist separatism, I think, is dying in the same way that the 19th century mechanical perspective gave way, because the evidence supported a different perspective, an expanded perspective. So for me, it's not about fighting anything. It's not about being in conflict with anything. It's actually following where the evidence leads, which has been the basic premise of scientific inquiry for centuries. But it's also, and this is, I think, coming back to what Federico said, and we're all saying, isn't it amazing that almost unless we experience this sense of interconnectedness directly for ourselves, it's actually very difficult to overcome a perspective that the appearance of our universe is separate and material. But I think for all of us here and all of us on the call, in some way or other, we've undertaken our own inner journey of discovery and a realization and a remembering of the ultimate wholeness, oneness of all that is, and the ultimate interconnectedness and unity of all that is. And that sustained us in following an evidence that actually is supporting that too. So for me, it's not about fighting or conflicting as anything. It's actually just sharing my own perspective without imposition, and following the evidence wherever it may lead. And it seems to me that the evidence is guiding us, inviting us into a remembering of wholeness and of unity expressed in amazing and wondrous diversity.
Thank you, Jude. Wonderful. So Federico?
Yes, I think science works quite well to explain the material world, the way it works, and the progress has been tremendous. So science is perfect for doing that. But if we interpret what science is saying based on a certain position, which is that we start with mathematical equations and everything derives from mathematical equations, then what we have a universe which is supposed to be deterministic in many ways, even if the determinism is in the probability amplitudes that are described by those equations. And they are described by those equations with a framework in which, due to unitarity, I'm sorry to use terminology which is specialistic, but if you ask that the world be display unitarity, you have a deterministic world in the probability amplitudes with which you describe the world. This is one of the contributions of Dariano, Professor Dariano, to show that unitarity is actually a non-falsifiable assumption. And so it should be abandoned. It came with the description of quantum physics from famous von Neumann as a postulate. But if you have that postulate, there is no free will. And so science needs to change something substantial about the way they look at the world. The most substantial thing that needs to be changed is the interpretation of what reality is, as opposed to the actual workings of science and the fact that there is an unbelievable experimental evidence for what science is telling us. So it's making a step forward in accepting that consciousness and free will must be fundamental, because if you don't accept that, the conclusion is absolutely firm that the universe is pointless. And if the universe is pointless, then our life is pointless. Anything else that follows is pointless, because the universe for science is everything that exists. So it is true. I mean, I agree with Jude that we need to, we don't want, I don't want to turn this into a fight. That's far from me to want a fight. I want the evidence of reasoning and showing that through reasoning, that certain postulates, for example, are not correct. And therefore we should accept that there are things that we still don't know. See, when scientists believe that they know everything, we got a problem. And because we then exclude this stuff that gives meaning to life and to the universe. And I stop here.
All right. Very good.
Something that we're
Yes.
in an alchemical retort at the moment. The whole world is in this alchemical retort. And so you're going to have the old mixture of the old science with the new mixture of the new science that's coming in, and it's all being in a chaotic state of confusion. The massa confusa is what the alchemists call it. But out of that will come this new creation, whatever it may be. Even out of the tension of the opposites, there comes the new creation. So I think we have to trust the process here. I do know that Nassim Haramein and Greg Graydon, for instance, are actually starting an 8-week course at the moment, in which they're showing that many scientists are accepting this new paradigm and are leaving the old one, because it hasn't given them anything more than a pointless universe, just what Federico said. And they're looking for something more with their heart, so to speak. They want something which gives them more satisfaction. So they're gradually, I think, coming over to a different way of thinking, and that's very positive. But with alchemy, you have a state of chaos, but that is important in order to produce the new state of order. So we have to trust the process, I think.
All right. Thank you, Anne. And yes, Anneloes.
I also think there's a new paradigm way of being able to create the bridges between the old paradigm scientific endeavors and the new ways of working. I think it's very important, not just the attitude of the science needs to take it serious, but that we need to ourselves make the effort within the scientific world to bring these explorations. I on purpose did my PhD at a conventional university, Maastricht University, at Maastricht Sustainability Institute, where this is all part of system sciences. I left science 20 years before that. I was first doing a PhD at Australian National University. This was in 1998. Then the time clearly wasn't ready for my questions. I went on a different journey where exploring the inner cosmos. And then in 2014, I went back into science and I thought, now the time is ready. And then went through the very painstaking journey of publishing in mainstream fields. Jude and I published an article there, Alexander and I published an article there to bring this there, but also within these conventional scientific contexts to create new methodologies for being able to bring these new knowledge systems there as well. So for me, it's not just about sitting here and saying, well, they have to take us serious. That to me is still a dualistic way of working. We're really new paradigm people. We also will be these change makers. We'll be working, with the people don't even see them as old paradigm. The moment we start to label people, oh, that's an old paradigm institution, that's an old paradigm person, we can't communicate. So reach also out to the curiosity in all of these people and start to have the conversation. Sometimes that meant for me, you have the conversation in the hallway, in the kitchen, not just in the official rooms, but you kindle the curiosity, you kindle the bridge, you start working the relationship, you find a little way to get this question in. In my case, it was getting system sensing accepted as a methodology for the research I was doing on the ground in researching the transformational dynamics of organizational development based on understanding the cosmological ways of learning and development. And that system sensing was then accepted as a form of knowledge creation and not just systems thinking and system dynamics and systems modeling. Let's all together be transformative in the way that we are getting this integrated, not just another old versus new. Yes, Jude.
Thanks, Anneloes. Thank you for reminding me and re-hearting me of that. Yes, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And it's not about sort of labeling anyone in that respective, because my sense is, and as Anne said, we're in this sort of alchemical cauldron of breakdown and breakthrough. It reminded me, though, when you said that, when I did my PhD in 2005, I actually dedicated my PhD in ancient cosmologies to discarnate guardians of the landscape. The PhD is in the British Library and it's accepted as an academic text, and it acknowledges and recognises discarnate guidance. So there is deep within whatever is happening now, and I love Anne's trust the process, that there is a stirring, there is a awakening, there is a coming forth of so much, and for us to be open. We started with curiosity, so to continue our journey of curiosity and openness and invite and welcoming and trusting the process. So thank you.
Also, it's accelerating, because in my lifetime, I've seen a tremendous acceleration, even in the last 2 or 3 years. It's astounding. I really think so. And there's so many people all over the world who are joined in with what we're talking about and who are in their different departments are working away, whether it's with the environment or whether it's with children or whatever. The only place it doesn't seem to be affecting is politics so far. But maybe that will come. Maybe the castle will crumble or the walls will crumble when the trumpet is blown.
Or maybe the people who follow this path that we're on remove ourselves from politics. It seems. But I'm going to turn it over. Yes. I'm going to turn it over to Alexander, and I'm going to switch roles and become a presenter. I'll let you take over for now, Alexander.
Perfect. I was just about to jump in anyway, as you see, so we're already on the same wavelength. And just to share exactly, and what you were just saying about politics, you know that the first symposium of the Laszlo Institute was on the new paradigm in politics. And anyone who's interested in that, please, you can get a chance to see all that happened on the Laszlo Institute YouTube channel. So that's still there. And you can also check it on the webpage of the Laszlo Institute. We did really explore that in very interesting ways. Of course, we didn't resolve it, but we have opened up that with the first symposium. And Anneloes and I, in fact, were the ones to then write the social science research report on that symposium. She's the lead author, and that's going to be coming out as a published volume in select books very soon. Let me just ask a few questions. I have 3 questions. We have like 18 minutes left. Let's see if we can get everyone to respond to these questions here, including Richard. So my first question has to do with something that Jude brought up. She's using the expression, Jude using the expression of remembering our wholeness, right? And it reminds me of this expression of Pablo Neruda, who talks about recuerdos del porvenir, as he says in Spanish, which is memories of things yet to come. And this goes to a question from one of the audience members. Chris Hudson says, it seems that central to any cosmology is some view of causation, of what are possible causes for events in nature, and that we need to greatly expand what we consider as possible. If any of you could comment on whether there is any role for retro causation or backward in time causation, it would be appreciated. And just to mention, this comes from, it relates to also one of the other presenters, Adrian Klein. He was talking about retro causation as well. Please.
Thank you. And these are really important questions. Personally, for me, 2 things. The model that has come forward with these 3 laws of infodynamics, which overlight quantum physics, relativity physics, and is a framework, a cosmology of consciousness, and evolution, really points to within space-time there being this arrow of time from the first moment of the big breath to now and onwards. And therefore within space-time, this sense of causality. And yet this perspective of non-locally whole universe is that our universe exists and evolves as a non-locally connected unified entity. So this allows synchronicities to occur, all of the supernormal phenomena to occur without violating that causation within space-time. And then we have this perspective of retrocausation, as both Chris and Adrian have brought forward. And where I am at the moment on this is there's been some wonderful work done by a researcher, and I may get the name wrong, so I apologize, but Adelman, and I write about this in the Cosmic Hologram, that suggests that there's a particular type of experiment called the double slit experiment and the pre-choice experiment within that scenario that suggests the possibility of retrocausation. And what he's saying is actually not. It's a bias of measurement. And it's a perspective of where the perception of separation occurs when it doesn't. So I'm happy to send to anyone who's interested in this particular question the summation of that analysis that suggests that actually retrocausation of itself does not occur within space-time unless there is a non-measurement. So in other words, if there's not an awareness, if there's not a measurement, then retrocausation has a loophole. But I think it's a very, very small loophole, because what we're seeing as the entire universe is a universe that by existing to evolve and by an inner flow of time, that retrocausation, if it violates causation, retrocausation, if it violates causation anyway, is not, it does not occur. It is forbidden in that regard.
My view two things. One is that no signal, no information from the future can come back in time. Information, I'm talking about information. There may be something that may appear, but but it's not really information. Just like with entangled particles, for example, you have simultaneity even when the two particles are so far apart that no signal could travel between the two. So that's one point. The other thing is that our sense of time, what is time in the normal experience that we have, is not well understood. To me, the ultimate causation is actually free will actions, because free will actions cannot be predicted by any algorithm or by any law, otherwise they wouldn't be free. That doesn't mean that entities that make free will actions, can capriciously do whatever they want. In fact, in that world, cooperation is foundational. They cannot be the kind of competition that we consider the rule of the day of the rules of the game. So in a world where there is free will, then there are decisions which are creations that are free, and there is one before the other. So there is a natural arrow in a sense of time, which is that this decision came after that decision, and ultimately it is the source. The true cause is a free will decision. It's not a physical cause that derives from a free will decision, if consciousness and free will are fundamental.
Thank you, Federico. I'm going to Anneloes. I know that you have also been a lot on this idea of sensing into future possibility states, the potentials, and collapsing those perhaps by engaging with those and observing in a certain way. Tell us, what is your view on this?
Exactly. Well, my view of future is that it's actually information that's in a superposition state of possibility, because it's the very information that's going to create that future. That actually information was there before already as well. So that's non-local. So that's not bound by space and time, and it's within the imaginal within us, which is not, as I said earlier, not just imaginative, but the imaginal where it's not predetermined, where you were saying, Federico. So it's not deterministic. This is where we can already access these future potentials, therefore. And that's when we start to identify with that and we start to engage it and participate, we actually localize it and it becomes embodied within us. And as soon as those informational dynamics and potentials become embodied within us, there is a causative flow. And in that same way, we could perhaps look at this retrocausality also as a way of how have we internalized what we call past. So if we shift and change the internalization of time within us, then there's also a different dynamic of our relationship with what we consider past or what we consider even time itself. And that sets up different dynamics and different patterns around us. And the universe is always responsive. So that also means that we are then attracting different possibilities. But I like to think of it more as a holotropic attractor. The future itself as a holotropic attractor that attracts us towards greater actualization, and that's that flow exactly that Jude was talking about. Therefore, not so much as the dualistic causative narrative that a lot of people, I feel, have been kind of trapped in, which sometimes can create a very fearful universe. So think of the universe as attracting us towards greater realization of the wholeness that's given.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move the conversation along and invite Richard and Anne to be the first ones to respond to the next question. But this clarification also, and it's great what you just shared also, Anneloes, because it is helping us think in ways that break us out of the linear causality framework in a deterministic world and help us live into a probabilistic, and more than that, what Federico is also talking about with the role of will, it's a possibilistic world where we can start to actually find ways of sensing into the possibility space and then finding ways as we tap into that, into this more implicate order domain, Anyway, I'm not supposed to be speaking here. Sorry, I get carried away because it's such powerful stuff. But let me ask my next question then we'll start with Richard, since you haven't spoken yet as a speaker, and then Anne, and then we'll turn to the other three. Federico talks about will and talks about also the intelligent cosmos. What does the universe want? Richard?
Well, I would say that the universe wants to acquire consciousness. Or let me go back even saying that the entity that from which the universe emerges wants to acquire consciousness. I believe that the transcendent reality, that which lies beyond the universe, and which I believe is infinite, eternal, unified, and oneness, starts in a state of unconsciousness, and the purpose of the universe is to acquire consciousness, and the human being is the mechanism, the final, and the whole evolution of the universe to finally have consciousness, which can then be used to acquire consciousness of that transcendent reality, and that every human being has the potential to become aware, know, and see, and become one with that transcendent reality. And in that process, it becomes conscious of itself.
Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, I was thinking, I used to have channeled messages through my mother, and I remember that some of them said there was a program for the planet which they hoped it would fulfill. It would complete its evolution one day, as other planetary systems in the cosmos had already done. So I get a sense of a sort of cosmic order in which consciousness develops in different planetary systems, including this one, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the thing is going to work in the end. We have the choice. That's why we have free will and choice of making it come about, as it were. But I'm looking at, I think the cosmos has created this thing that we're in at the moment in order to discover what it might be like to live in a different way, as it were, to try a different method of living or discovering. And we're part of that experiment. But it's becoming more than an experiment. It's becoming now a goal, if you like, a conscious goal as we become more conscious. I mean, look back at 30, 40 years ago, this conversation could never have taken place because people weren't sufficiently conscious or aware to have it. So I think there's been huge progress, and that's why I say everything is accelerating now. And so the cosmos must be pleased at this conversation that we're having and give us all a pat on the back and say, go further, don't stop there, and pay attention to your intuitions, and don't pay attention to what's happening in the ordinary world, because that's the world which really needs to be surmounted, or what's the word? It needs not left behind exactly, but if we get too bogged down in the world as it is, we lose heart and we don't know what to do. Whereas if we focus on what we want to bring into being, this new consciousness, we can do many things, as Anneloes is saying, that, and Jude, many things are possible when we think that things are possible. And so we bring them into being because of that sense of possibility and inherent hope and interest as the cosmos itself.
So, and this is about the self-transcendence is what I'm hearing in a really fundamental way. And how do we do that as part of the transcendence of the universe? And of the cosmos, sorry, in a more specific way. I want to
add in here, I have a great friend called Chris Bache, who took this extraordinary psychedelic journey into the heart of the cosmos. And he says the next step is really for us to become diamond souls. And that's a lovely image, I think. We go from what we are into a conscious becoming of what we could be, what is our potential as diamond souls on this planet, in which we do what is meant to be doing, what we're meant to be doing for the planet, as an integrated part of the planet, not as something separate, but something that's part of its life, and at the same time part of the cosmic life. So I think that's a lovely idea, to have the image of the diamond soul that's coming into being. We can assist this process by all the different things that we're contributing ourselves. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. And again, this is one of the dynamics of self-transcendence. I'm aware of the possibility that we may be anthropomorphizing and personifying in human form the will of the cosmos. Reflections again on what the cosmos wants, and is this inappropriate anthropomorphizing? Let me turn first to Federico.
Well, to me, what one wants, which is the universe, all that exists, is to know itself and to fulfill itself through the knowing of itself. And so if you start with that position, then the knowing itself is becoming conscious. You know, you go from some unconsciousness, which, however, I don't call it non-existence. I call it simply potential existence, because non-existence is the negation. You cannot even talk about non-existence, so it's just the semantics here. But to me, that is simply potential existence, something which is unconscious, and that it comes into existence by becoming conscious of itself. Once something becomes conscious of itself, it's like a birth. And so from that point on, that consciousness continues to evolve through communication between conscious entities. And so you have a co-evolution of the symbolic reality, which would be like the physical reality, and the inner reality, which is the semantic reality. So you have this continuing growth that appears in the physical world as ever more complex things, like human bodies, which are enormously complex. The consciousness, which is behind, which is the inner experience, the meaning that the evolving consciousness gather through its long evolution.
Federico, thank you. I'm going to, then we have two more, we'll wrap up this. We have basically 2 more minutes. So relatively brief, turn to Anneloes and the last word with Jude.
The following is not a scientific, but a spiritual vision to answer your question. When I was sharing this slide about the beginning of the universe and then its possible future, and you see this fire in the beginning, or Jude was saying yesterday, it begins very hot. In the end, you have the informational content increases and the temperature going down. Now, the vision that I'm holding for that is that the sacred fire, the alchemical fire that Anne spoke of, has now become embodied in all of us. So rather than it being this singularity or original point, it's like that sacred fire, that deep love, that within which is the full journey of our discovery, of our exploration, of our self-actualization, is now fully in. It's become its completeness. So for me, the desire of the cosmos and its will is within that evolutionary impulse, and I find that truly a mystical journey. That's yes, I'm in awe of this process.
Thank you so much. Jude.
Thank you, everyone. I mean, I'm coming back to a question I asked when I began to write Gaia her story, or she began to write me. And the question was, why? Why? Why did an infinite and eternal cosmic mind co-create a great thought that we're beginning to understand as our universe? I was in wonder at the audacity of the visionary magnificence of why and how could the infinite eternal mind of the cosmos dream the perfect intimacy, intricacy, and evolutionary impulse of such a thought. And at the end of the book, what I came to was a perception of an answer. And what I sense is the story of a universe that learns through its holographic and holarchic manifestation, and through its exploration, experience, and evolutionary reflections to further know itself, which is what we're all in our different ways of suggesting. Its innate unity through the co-creative appearance of its dualities with their universal and alchemical masculine and feminine attributes, then reconciles in the trinities of the child expressions. Their flourishing in the diversity and complexity of its ongoing journey will eventually come full circle, full spiral, from unity to unity in diversity, to a remembered unity in belonging, and an ultimate return to unity. That's my sense of an answer to why and how we're here as we stand together on the bow wave of our universe soul's evolutionary impulse and potential. And I'm just so grateful we are together here and now.
Thank you so much, Jude. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anneloes. Thank you, Federico. Thank you, Richard.